It's all about the deal at Brunswick Auto Mart. Save big this month with deals like this. Don't miss the Make This the Summer event and lease a 2022 Ram 1500 Bighorn Quad Cab Night Edition 4x4 with 20-inch blackout wheels for just $375 a month. Or lease a 2022 Ram 1500 Laramie Crew Cab for just $397 a month. Brunswick Auto Mart. Car buying made truly simple.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Believeland Prep Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Slez. With me, as always, Mr. Joe Yule. How you doing, Joe?
I'm fantastic, Kev. Great day of games, a great week of games this past weekend, and we got another great week slated for this week. Really excited. We're really close to playoff time, and, I'm just pumped, man. It's high school sports. All the kids are playing because they love the game.
Yeah, it's definitely coming down the stretch towards a postseason, and we've got some good Week 7 games to recap and some good Week 8 games to take a look at as previews. So, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, we're gonna travel out to Medina, and talk about that Medina game. Medina comes out on top, 52-38. It's like we talk about the guy every week in a recap, but he's really just that good. And, our reporter, Joey Schneider, was at the game, and he can back me on this. Danny Stoddard is the guy. I mean, the dude can sling it. But, let's not take away from the sophomore quarterback at Menor and Scott Fox, I believe. Yeah. He from what Joey said, he's still a phenomenal player. Sometimes, Menor just gets the best of you. But, yeah, Joey Schneider out reporting at the game. And we have a few highlight clips if you guys go watch the articles and things like that. And he's got an interview with head coach Larry Laird. But some players of the game that Joey marked off was from Menor. Scotty Fox, like I said, their quarterback having 36 completions for 492 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had 3 interceptions, though. So, you can definitely tell when that hurts when you lose 52-38. You do the math there and you lose by 22, right? You turn those 3 interceptions into, 2 scores, and 2 touchdowns, right? You go 2 for 3 in those series, and you're looking at a 1-score game. You got an 8-point game. Your kicker converts on both field goals, right? So I think the key for Menor right now is just regrouping, rallying back together, getting behind Coach Matt Gray, and just keep going. The Cardinals play a very, very challenging schedule, obviously kicking off their season with Canton McKinley getting a win, and then week 2 having a very tough loss in triple overtime to a tough St. Ignatius team who we'll get to later. But Menor's had a lot of great wins, even though they've had tough losses. Menor beating a 6-1 Riverside team 7-6. I mean, that's a football score for you.
Right. And,
then they lose to Football North from Ontario, 28-48 the next week after that. And then they win against Brunswick, who's only 2-5. Brunswick on a down year this year. And, then they lose to Medina last week at Medina. But, a huge week, I think, for Menor because, as a football coach and a football player, your memo is always defend your home field, right? You always want to go undefeated at home because that's your place. You don't ever want anybody to come in on your stomping grounds, right? And they got a tough Solon team at 5-2. I think it's going to be a really good test for this Menor Cardinals team that Coach Gray's got over there at Menor. I mean, they're like I said, Scott Fox. Over 500 yards over 400 yards on Friday night, throwing the ball, 36 completions, and 5 touchdowns to go along with that. They're going to play a tough Solon team this upcoming week, but I'm really excited for that. And then Medina, on the other hand, like I said, it's Danny Stoddard, right? I mean, the guy's unreal. 33 completions for 411 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. But I do know, he had over 300 yards at halftime.
Wow.
So, obviously Medina trying to methodically slow the game down in that second half after having a little bit of a lead and they're just trying to really grind it out. And they tired that team out. But Jack Wosiak, I think is how you pronounce the name. He's been Stoddard's go-to guy all year, having 7 receptions for 187 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a big game in that week 2 performance against Avon as well, having another 3 touchdowns to go along with that game. So, even though how good Stoddard is, you watch the kid play live, and Stoddard's a very good player. He has phenomenal accuracy. We spoke to Wadsworth coach in an interview about that, about how he prepares for Aller and Stoddard and how they're 2 separate players. And Stoddard might be a little bit more accurate than Aller. But you look at it, and, Stoddard's got playmakers after playmakers catching the ball for him. And, Coach Laird loves to go 5 wide. And they did it a lot on Friday night, and they're going to keep doing it all year because that's what they're good at. That's their identity, is throw the ball and we're going to beat you. We don't care if you know that it's coming. We'll throw 5-yard hitches, and my receivers are going to turn it into a 30-yard game. That's the memo over there at Medina, and the bees keep rolling through this week.
All right, so I was out in Brimfield on Friday as Field was hosting Streetsboro. Streetsboro ends up taking this one 38-34. It was a really good game. They moved to 4-3 on the season, dropping Field to 3-4. Kind of a somber moment before the game. I know a lot of people know about the tragic accident that happened Friday, September 26th, where a member of Field Youth Football, Donald Robinson, the 11-year-old, lost his life. And he wore number 47. And before the game, both teams from Streetsboro Field lined up at half field or midfield, and they did a 47-second moment of silence for him and his family who was there. So that was a nice. So just condolences out to the Robinson family, first and foremost. But get to the game. Streetsboro ended up scoring the first possession. Quarterback Colby Benjamin took it in for a 23-yard run. Field on their first possession moved down to the 5-yard line, but they were held on a 4th and 2 on an incomplete pass. Field turned it over again on downs the next possession. So they went on 4th down a couple times or came up short. And then the next Streetsboro possession, their stud running back, Preston Hopperton, scored from 51 yards out. But unfortunately for them, he was lost to an ankle injury. He had 5 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown at the time, and he would not return. But I mean, they have guys behind him that are good, and they came in and filled the void. But it was a 14-0 game at halftime. Field scored their first possession of the second half, a 1-yard touchdown run by Brandon Baumgartner. And then quarterback Cody Benjamin for Streetsboro scored again, making it 24-7. Looked like they might be pulling away. But Drexel McCamus from Field, their standout running back, scored on a 67-yard touchdown run. I think he broke about 5 or 6 tackles. It was pretty impressive. That made it 24-14. But, Rockets come right back. Their all-state wrestler, Donovan Pays, scores from 20 yards out, 31-14. Again, looks like maybe they're pulling away. But the Field engineered a 70-yard drive. Again, McCamus had 63 of those 70 yards, and Baumberger scored again from 1 yard out. And then next possession, he hit Tanner Rowe for 17 yards, making it 31-27. And then their defense came up big, forced a 3-and-out, and Baumberger, again, 8-yard touchdown, his third of the game, put Field up 34-31 with 1:40 to go. But that Streetsboro offensive attack came right back, and quarterback Benjamin found Cohen Klimek down the sidelines for a 53-yard touchdown, putting them up 38-34. Field still had a chance. It came down to the last play, but they couldn't pull it off. So a big 38-34 win for Streetsboro. Looking at some of the stats, quarterback Colby Benjamin, 5 of 11, 88 yards and a touchdown. Also had 51 yards rushing and a touchdown. Backup running back Kyle Onru, who came in place of Hopperton, had 10 carries for 93 yards. And on the Field side, Braxton Baumgartner, 10 for 24, 123 yards and a touchdown. Also ran the ball 104 yards in those 3 touchdowns. So 4 touchdowns for the game for him. And then McCamus, the running back, had 16 carries, 178 yards and a touchdown and 3 receptions for 60 yards. So a big game out of him and a losing effort.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm a big fan of that Field team. We got an opportunity to talk to Braxton Baumberger after his performance that he won Player of the Week. If you guys haven't seen that, go check that out. He's a phenomenal young man. But anyways, getting this a little suburban league action, because us at Believeland, we love some suburban league action. It seems like, so we're covering a suburban league game every single week. It seems. But we had Hudson traveling to Nordonia. Hudson coming into the game 6-0, Nordonia coming into the game 5-1. So, two very tough powerhouse teams in the Suburban League this season. And for Hudson, it was a heavy run offense all night long. Quarterback Jagger Pale went 8 for 10 with 81 yards, and his only touchdown that he had of the night coming on the ground. And then Ludwig, the running back, led the way with the offense for 38 carries, 214 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And Jake Jenkins led the short receiving end for the Explorers with 2 receptions for 87 yards. So, a very strong performance from Hudson, obviously getting the win in a 28-14 win over Nordonia. And for Nordonia, it was really a more balanced first half attack. And, they tried to stay balanced, but then, in the second half, as they started falling back, you saw that they had to become a little bit one-dimensional and throw the ball a lot more. But Nordonia's quarterback, Palinskas, was 20 for 35 with 180 yards. And he had 3 turnovers in the game. I brought that up in the Menor recap, talking about that game, how Scott Fox had, 3 interceptions there. And you see how much of a difference that these turnovers can make, because it's a 28-14 game. And, it's a tight game going into the half. And then the Knights start falling a little back, and those turnovers can't help at all. But he was successful on the ground still. Nordonia's quarterback in Palinkas, carrying the ball 18 times for 104 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. And then Tufts led the receiving way for the Knights with 8 receptions for 69 yards. So, I think the medicine for Nordonia is when they play a tough team, they gotta control the clock. They have to, they have to keep grinding away and stay 2-dimensional, because you saw when they had to get 1-dimensional, it obviously didn't work against Hudson. This, say what you want about Nordonia. Nordonia is still a very phenomenal, or a very talented team. They're a very well coached team. But this Hudson team's good. They're good. They're not a joke of a team in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this Hudson team moves into number 2 spot in the Region 5 rankings in Division 5, and they beat a 5-2 Solon team 14-13. They smoked Euclid. They smoked Harding by 2 scores. They beat Twinsburg handily. They beat Wadsworth, who's 5-2, 17-7. They smoke Brecksville, and then they come back and they beat a tough Nordonia team 28-14. And they got a tough game against North Royalton this upcoming week, who's a 4-3 team, and we'll talk about that game a little bit later. But this Hudson team that Jeff Koch's guys, I mean, it's a legit team, and they're nothing to mess around with by any means. And this Nordonia Knights team, coached by Jeff Fox, is going to drop in the rankings to number 6 if you go off of Joe Ital like I do. Shout out to Joe Ital for that, but this Nordonia team is on a 2-game losing streak. Hopefully they can bounce back against a 1-6 Stowe Monroe Falls team. Stowe not having a very good year, obviously first year with a new head coach. It's going to be a little shaky at times, getting regrouped, building the program up to what it used to be. But this Nordonia team has beat very talented teams. They beat this North Royalton team 37-14 earlier in the year, week 4. They beat a 4-3 Mayfield team. They beat a 4-3 Berea Mid-Park team. But their 2 losses are 2 very talented Suburban League teams in Wadsworth and Hudson. So, it's going to be difficult, I think, for Nordonia to bounce back, especially because they are traveling to Stowe, and it can be a very hostile environment sometimes playing in Stowe. But, nonetheless, Stowe is 1-6, and, you're 5-2. Obviously, you would think that you can win this game and bounce back and get a little bit of leverage before you come home for week 9 for senior night against Brecksville.
Well, you mentioned crucial turnovers, and there was a real crucial turnover in this next game I'm about to look at. It was a battle of the Fighting Irish, St. Vincent St. Mary against Ursuline, and St. Vincent St. Mary comes out on top 35-28. The St. Vincent St. Mary led 28-21 late in the 4th quarter. Ursuline was driving down to try to tie the score at 28, and St. Vincent St. Mary's Luke Shinigo picked off a Jack Erickson pass and returned it for a touchdown, which pretty much put the game away 35-21. Ursuline scored a late touchdown with 48 seconds left on a 28-yard pass from DC Farrell to Mark Manning, and that gave us the final tally 35-28. But a huge interception there that turned the tides and pretty much gave the game to St. Vincent St. Mary. Looking at them offensively, D'Anthony Keller, 14 carries, 134 yards and a touchdown. Santino Harper had 22 carries, 89 yards and a touchdown. And for Ursuline, their quarterback, Erickson had 229 yards passing. Wide receiver Mark Manning, 8 catches, 133 yards. And DC Farrell also had 8 receptions for 110 yards. So you look at their matchups, St. Vincent St. Mary's got a tough one. They have to take on Lamar Sperling and Akron Hoban. So that's definitely going to be a tough test. You know, they're 7-0 and, you know, steamrolling everybody. And then Ursuline travels to Villa Angela St. Joe's for week 8.
Yeah, St. Edward, St. Ignatius, obviously the Holy War. We got a chance to interview Coach Kyle this past week. Such a wise man. My apologies to anybody who didn't watch the YouTube video of that interview because I probably looked pissed off in it. But I told Kevin after I was probably going to look pissed off because I was so intrigued by what Coach Chuck Kyle had to talk about. Obviously being in Northeast Ohio or Ohio high school football great. When somebody of that stature, somebody of that success talks about their success and you get to dive into their life a little bit and find out, what makes their world go round in a way, it's really cool. It's really interesting. It was awesome to interview him, but sadly for Coach Kyle, he loses his last Holy War 48-6 in a victory where the Eagles just fly through the Wildcats. A very shocking one, I think, for most people. A lot of people wouldn't have expected it. But St. Edward just ran the ball, and they ran it hard, and they ran it down the Wildcats' throat. Coach Lombardo got interviewed after the game, and, numerous times you saw him saying, I don't think anybody saw this coming. But, he brought up, and if you guys have an opportunity, you definitely go watch our week 2 interview with Coach Lombardo, because he talks about how tough his schedule is, right? And, I think that really speaks volume to why he scheduled such a tough schedule, because you saw this team kind of struggle against Toledo Central Catholic week 1, right? You saw them, struggle. You saw them beat Pittsburgh, Central Catholic from Pittsburgh the next week. And then you see them beat Cherry Creek week 3. And then, I think they played Elder week 4. And, they're playing such a difficult schedule, right? And then they lose to Massillon, Washington, week 5. And it's a very difficult game for the Eagles to bounce back from, but they do, and they do it fine. But point being behind all of this is you see this Eagles team go from a very close win against Toledo Central Catholic week 1 to smoking the number 17 in the state week 7. Speaks volumes to what Coach Lombardo is doing at that school, right? What the message that he puts forward towards the players, the every day of just getting 1% better. When you show up to practice, you got better. When you went to that game, you got better. And you saw that throughout those first 6 weeks of them playing these tough teams and battling at it. You saw a team that just came out and they put the St. Ignatius talk to bed.
Yeah, I mean, Eds is a powerhouse, and they're a powerhouse this year. I mean, to take it to them like they did. And you mentioned Coach Kyle, and what an honor and a privilege it was to have him on. It's 50+ years of coaching, multiple state championships, national championships, and to be able to get him on, before he hangs it up was pretty awesome.
No, most definitely. And one last thing to add about that is, hoping that Josh Popish makes a speedy recovery. He actually came out of the game with an injury on Saturday against the Eagles. He's St. Ignatius' starting quarterback, also a very good basketball player for St. Ignatius alongside that. So, hoping he definitely makes a speedy recovery with everything. But Casey Bullock is the dude can play. Quarterback and defensive back from St. Edwards. He can play, and so can their running back. The game sealer, though, was a big focal point. Was a blocked punt at the end of the game and a big Ty Turner block punt at the end of the game for St. Edwards, and Coastal Carolina commit picks it up and takes it for 6. So, I think you see why the St. Ed's team is so good.
Yeah, definitely. As far as our last recap, we've got Kirtland, who's moved to 7-0 on the season. They keep rolling along, 36-16 over Perry, who drops to 5-2. Now Coach Tyker LaVerge is doing his thing there, and you're going to hear that name quite a few times in this recap. But Perry actually scored the first touchdown and a 2-point conversion to start the game. Went up 8-0. They scored the first touchdown, first score, and the last score of the game. And in between, they were outscored 36-0 by Kirtland. But they scored on a 20-yard pass from Walter Moses to Owen McCoon, to get the scoring started. But then Kirtland went on their run. Actually, they held them on a punt. They drove to the Kirtland 28 on their second possession. But Rocky Alfieri for Kirtland forced a fumble, recovered by Philip Laverde at the 3-yard line. And then Jake Laverde, quarterback, threw a 69-yard touchdown pass to Gino Blasini, which got the Kirtland rolling. They were up 15-8 at half, so still a close game. But second half, they pulled away. They put up 390 yards of total offense. Jake Laverde, the quarterback, 5 for 11, 136 yards, had a touchdown and a pick. A nice game out of the wide receiver, Gino Blasini, 3 catches, 129 yards and a touchdown. And running back Rocco Alfieri, 23 carries, 117 yards and a touchdown. And looking at Perry, in a losing effort, quarterback Walter Moses was 15 of 23, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Next week, Kirtland takes on 5-2 Lakeside, and Perry hosts 0-7 Orange. So Kirtland looks to keep their undefeated season rolling and get back into the postseason where they're usually at every year.
Right. Yeah, and then we got coming up for our previews this upcoming week. I'll kick it off with Austintown Fitch traveling to Wadsworth, where we will have our reporter Brady Hamilton at that game. So, we're definitely excited for that. And for this season for Fitch, having a very successful 6-1 season up to this point, being the number 1 team ranked in Youngstown, being the number 2 team ranked, or number 2 team ranked in Division II, and being the number 6 team ranked in the state completely. A very talented Austintown Fitch team. Those stats obviously coming from Max Preps. But junior quarterback Vaughn is, he's a heck of a player, having 261 yards up to this point, or last week. Cam Smith, the number 34 ranked player in this year's class. He's committed to Iowa State. He's an athlete from Fitch High School. He's a phenomenal player. He's what you want out of a Division I player. You know what I mean? He's a very talented player. And Wadsworth's team, coming into the game at a 5-2 record, obviously very difficult. But we got a chance to talk to coach over at Wadsworth, and he talked about iron sharpens iron, right? And I talked about St. Ed's playing such a difficult schedule, right? And Wadsworth, Justin Todd talks to us about how iron sharpens iron. Well, sometimes just playing great competition sharpens it up too, and that's what Wadsworth has done with their in-league schedule because of how talented the Suburban League is this year, and is every year for the most part. Their 2 losses being to 6-1 Medina and 7-0 Hudson. So a very, very talented team. I'm very excited to see how this game plays out this week. If it wasn't for my game alone, I'd be there.
So my first preview, we're looking at Solon at 5-2, traveling out to Menor, who's 3-3, who we talked about a little bit earlier. If you look at Solon's schedule, they had wins over Shaker Heights, Stowe, Strongsville, Twinsburg, and Brunswick. And their only losses were to a 7-0 Hudson team and Cathedral Prep out of Pennsylvania. Their key players got quarterback Harley Barman, running back EJ Taylor, and wide receiver Brian McQuaid. Didn't have any stats available on them. But looking at Menor, they had wins over Canton McKinley, very tough Riverside team, and Brunswick. And their losses were to St. Ignatius, 26-20. That was a close game. Clarkson North out of Canada, and Medina. And, we already talked about Danny Stoddard and how tough he is to defend. But we talked about their quarterback, Scotty Fox, had the 492 yards versus Medina. That puts them up to 1,752 yards on the season with 20 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. So should be a good one there.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for that game also. That's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be a great test for the Solon team. I also think it's going to be a great test, and that Menor's, is going to have a kind of a bounce back week in a way. You definitely think that Coach Gray is going to be talking about having, it's probably right around homecoming time, if they haven't had it already. If not, it's getting close to senior night, depending on how their schedule plays out. So, these games mean a lot. For some of these players at Menor, this is going to be the last time that they get to put on a Cardinal uniform and play in front of that amazing crowd that Menor puts on every week. Obviously, Menor having the number 2 ranked player in Ohio in this year's class, and Brendan Vernon being a Notre Dame commit. But from what I've seen and from what I've heard, he's a phenomenal player. The kid is absolutely insane, but obviously you find a way to deal with him sometimes.
Right.
But my next one is where Brady Hamilton's going to be at this upcoming, or sorry, not Brady Hamilton, Joey Schneider is going to be at this upcoming Friday. He'll be at North Royalton at Hudson. Hopefully, we're definitely trying to get in for that game. Excited for that game. We've touched on both teams. Hudson obviously having a phenomenal rushing attack, and North Royalton, it seems to be the rushing attack also. Junior running back having 166 carries for 946 yards, and and Cody Miller. He's a junior running back. He's averaging 157 yards per game. So that's definitely the attack of plan for the North Royalton team there. And they also have a senior running back who has 35 carries for 214 yards. He also does have a 100-yard touchdown. So, this guy can put on the burners and will. But, it's definitely a rushing attack from North Royalton. But their quarterback can sling it, having eight touchdowns on the year in the passing department. So, I'm excited to see how this game fares out. If I had to pick, I'm probably going to pick Hudson because I just talked about how legit Hudson is this year. But I think North Royalton's a very underrated team in the Suburban League, and they're going to put up a great fight.
So we head out to Portage County, where 6-0 Mogadore heads to Southeast, who's 4-2. Looking at Mogadore's schedule, their wins came against Field, the Columbus Crusaders, Manchester, Liberty Benton, Lucas, and Warren JFK. And of course, this game this past week was canceled with your university boys. Had some illnesses going on there. Hopefully everybody's healthy for this week.
We are. We're all ready to go for Bedford.
But looking at Mogadore, Zeke Cameron, he doesn't pass much, but when he does, he's pretty efficient. 19 for 30, 301 yards, 9 touchdowns, no interceptions on the season. Wow. And then a guy you're pretty familiar with, Mason Williams, they're kind of do it all. He's got almost 400 yards. And
so
offense,
so
defense.
Good, man. Like the hype around him is true.
Yeah.
The kid's committed to OU, but play somewhere else on Saturdays, maybe.
Yeah. So he's going to be a tough test for Southeast. Looking at Southeast, they really haven't been they haven't played an opponent as good as Mogadore this season, so it's going to be a big test for them. They have wins over Brooklyn, Akron North, Minerva, and Wyndham, and their 2 losses were to Field and Champion. Their quarterback, Randy Williams, who was our Week 6 small school player of the week on the season, he's 27 for 48, 480 yards, 6 touchdowns, also has not thrown an interception. He has 605 rushing yards. So it looks like he has a shot to eclipse 1,000 yards in passing and rushing. Their next closest rushing leader is 183 yards out of Michael Phillips. So it's pretty much the Randy Williams show on offense. And wide receiver Case Myers has 23 receptions for 420 yards. So, we'll see if Southeast can put up a fight against a very tough Mogadore team.
Most definitely. I'm really excited for this St. Ignatius game hosting Cincinnati powerhouse Archbishop Moeller. Moeller coming into the game 7-0. Having very meaningful wins over very talented teams also to put along with that. But obviously this Ignatius team coming off of a very difficult loss in the Holy War. So, they're coming back home to Byers Field on Saturday. Going to be interesting to see how this is held. But, Archbishop Moeller Crusaders, coached by Mark Elder, 7-0. Having a lot of impressive wins. Obviously beating this might be the most impressive win of the season is Moeller upsetting, in a way, Massillon Washington at their place week 1. And who we know a Massillon Washington team that upset, in a way, St. Ed's in week 5, right? So, you want to go through all these, stats and things like that with how analytically sound today's age is stay with me here, right? Moeller beat Moeller beat Washington, Massillon Washington beat Eds, St. Ed's beat Ignatius and smoked Ignatius, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, you would think that this should be an easy win for Moeller, but it's not. Coach Chuck Kyle is going to have his guys coming back strong. Hopefully Josh Popish is back and ready to roll for them. But if anything, their backup quarterback did not look anything near bad. He's a very talented kid. He's going to be able to go in there and sling it against this Moeller team, I think. But this Moeller team is very talented, and they're a very two-balanced team. Their one junior running back has 42 carries for 457 yards, and Marshall, he's going to be a phenomenal player someday. And then also Tanel Bryant averaging 102 yards per reception. He's a very talented kid as well. Jordan Marshall, like I said, running back, is very good. And their quarterback, they kind of switch in and out sometimes, but because they have two juniors, but the main guy is Luke Dunn. He's completed 31 of his 46 attempted passes. He's currently got a completion rate of 67.5%. He's got 651 passing yards on the season and 9 touchdowns. The other guy has 12 completions on 22 attempts for 163 yards. So obviously a little bit falled back. He's played in 3 games, and so has their starting quarterback, but they're both juniors. Both excited to see where Drew Robinson ends up as well. Drew has no touchdowns on the season right now, so a little bit falling off. But obviously for Ignatius, it's going to be how can we figure out to get back to doing what we do, right? Ignatius coming off of a very tough loss, as I mentioned, having a very big win to River Rogue last week, and then losing 2 weeks ago to Hoban. This Ignatius team is tough. They've only lost to good teams, but it almost hasn't been close sometimes, right? They lose 28-7 to Hoban, 3-score game. It's not close, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
And then Ed smokes them 48-6. So, we'll see how that comes out. I'm, really excited to see what happens with this game.
Definitely. So for our last recap, we stay in Portage County, where we've got the Woodridge Bulldogs at 4-3, traveling to Streetsboro to take on the Rockets, who are also 4-3, coming off that big win at Field. Looking at Woodridge on the season, they have wins over Revere, Coventry, Norton, and Springfield, and their losses were to a 6-1 West Branch team, Cuyahoga Valley Christian, and a very good 6-1 Cloverleaf team. So they've played the better teams pretty well. Looking at Streetsboro, they've got wins over West Geauga, Struthers, Ravenna, and Field, and their losses are to 5-2 Girard, 5-2 Norton, and that 6-1 Cloverleaf team. There were no stats available for Woodridge, but looking at Streetsboro, quarterback Colby Benjamin has 52 for 95, 770 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions on the season. And they're due it all, man. Pretty much the offense goes through him. Preston Hopperton, 727 rushing yards, 443 receiving yards. But the big question is going to be is his ankle healed? Because he was able to walk off under his own power, but very gingerly. So, that's gonna be a big factor on if he plays or not. But like I said, Streetsboro was trotting out backups, kind of like the Falcons were against the Browns, and they were carrying the load. So they'll be ready either way.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we got a great week of games slated. Like I said, we're gonna have Brady Hamilton in Wadsworth covering the Austintown Fitch game at Wadsworth, and then we'll have Joey Schneider at 2 games this weekend. Actually, we're gonna have him Friday night at North Royalton versus at Hudson versus North Royalton, and then he'll also be at University School for the 2:00 kickoff game against Bedford. Excited to see how our boys respond from having a week off, obviously due to ill sickness, right? 20
Yeah.
a good amount of your team out with sickness. It's obviously difficult to come back from, but really glad everybody's healthy. Excited that Joey finally gets to come see University. Him and I have been talking about this for a while.
Right.
Prayers for Joey's laptop. Hoping with a speedy recovery for that, but I'm excited. I'm excited, man. We got high school football back in the groove and everything, and I can't be more happy.
Yeah, we covered 3 games last week. Looks like we're going to have 4 this week. So, we're ramping up the coverage as much as we can coming down the stretch here, heading to the postseason. So definitely looking forward to that. And, we'll be back next week to recap some of these week 8 games and looking ahead to week 9. We're almost there, almost to the week 10.
Right. Hopefully, have some
preseason.
interviews for you guys this upcoming week as well.
Yeah, we'll work on getting a couple as well. So that'll be it for this week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care.
Thanks, guys.